In this next hand, we're playing 7-handed. No straddle on in this hand. Folds to the cutoff, who opens for $15. Folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at 2 black aces. The greatest hand ever created. So time for a 3-bet, and I make it $60 out of position. Pretty standard sizing. Only the cutoff calls. So heads up this time to King, Queen, 9, Rainbow. When a board is disconnected and I only have 1 pair, oftentimes, especially out of position, I'll go into pot control mode. So that's what I decided to do here. I check it over to him, and he puts out a bet right away, and it's pretty sizable. Bet's $120, full pot. Not exactly loving it, but obviously not gonna just check fold to 1 bet here. So I make the call, off to a turn card, which comes total brick, offsuit 4. I check it, and this time he checks it back. River comes another king, so not exactly the card that I had in mind. Don't see too much value in betting here, and after I check it over to my opponent apparently does see value in betting here. He bets $280. So not really feeling too good about this situation. However, I don't think I can fold here, because it is pretty interesting that I have 2 aces, and ace-king is double blocked by my hand. Would he really be betting full pot on the flop with a hand like king-jack or king-10? Tough to say, but I have to suspect that would be a bit overvaluing those types of hands. Of course, that's just me projecting, and I don't really know what he would do. Maybe he just sees top pair and would bet that much. With all those factors in mind, and after the flop goes check-check, don't want to just give up my hand after maybe under-repping it a little bit, just check calling on the flop. So doing my usual thing here, I toss in the call, and we get shown 7-4 of spades. So seems as if we got the maximum here, and just under-repping our hand, going into check call mode there works out very nicely. Take it down. Very shortly after that, more interesting stuff happens, as it does, as it tends to do when you're playing poker for money. So anyway, the under the gun player opens for 25. Under the gun plus 1 calls, button calls, over to us in the big blind, looking down at pocket aces. The #1 best hand ever created. So time to put in a 3-bet, as you might have guessed, and I size it to $145. Under the gun thinks about it for a little bit and then folds. Under the gun plus 1 folds pretty quickly. Back to the button, who makes the call. So we are off to see a flop here, heads up. Flop is 5-3 deuce rainbow, which I think is a pretty good flop, because yes, he could have flopped a set here. He could also have some overpairs here that are gonna have to continue to a C-bet. They are going to want to maybe occasionally protect against a hand like ace-king that has 2 overs plus a straight draw. So I'm definitely gonna put in a bet here, and I think I can size up for those reasons. So I bet $200, and my opponent doesn't think for too long before ripping it in, jamming about $750 into the middle. It's a little bit trivial of a call here. If we're losing to a set, then that sucks, but we're just gonna have to call it off. There's too many overpairs that my opponent can have. Again, he could be trying to protect against a hand like ace-king, and I could be putting in a squeeze play there with such a hand, ace-king, ace-queen, something like this, facing the initial raiser and the 2 calls in between. So after he jams it in, I'm gonna call it. We're gonna see all 5 cards once again. The turn pairs the board. The river brings a 6. There's now 4 to a straight on board. But good news is we get shown 6-3 of spades. My opponent flopped pair plus straight draw, and thankfully that 5 on the turn protects us from that 6 on the river. We end up with a better 2 pair, aces and 5s, than his 3 pair, you might say. No, 6s and 5s. That's a nice turn of events following the ace-10 hand immediately before that one. All right, one more hand to look at, and it's definitely worth a look. So in this hand, the under the gun player opens for 15. There's a call in middle position, and I look down at pocket jacks in the hijack. In several of my previous videos, I've mentioned not wanting to put in a 3-bet versus an under the gun raiser. However, I've started to kind of question my thinking in that regard, because oftentimes I see a lot of people putting in a 3-bet versus a early position or under the gun raiser in these low stakes to mid stakes games, and they seem to do okay with it. It doesn't seem like the under the gun range is too snug to where we're just automatically putting ourselves in a bad spot and putting ourselves open to a 4-bet that we're not gonna like seeing. So anyway, I've been thinking about that a little bit, and this is one of those spots I try to take advantage of, especially with the 3x open. If it was a 4x or 5x open, maybe I would flat more often. Versus the 3X, I make it $60 to go. The button cold calls and the under the gun and middle position players call as well. So we are still going 4 ways to a flop here. Flop comes queen, queen, 9 with 2 diamonds. Action checks to me, and even though with the 2 queens on board, and certainly one of my opponents can maybe have a queen or pocket 9s, I think a bet makes sense here for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want to see an ace or a king come on the turn if we happen to give a free card. 2, I think my opponents are going to play mostly face up in this situation. When you're in a multi-way hand and it's a 3-bet pot, those 2 factors sort of combine, and most of your opponents, I think, are probably going to have to play pretty straightforward. When you're in a multi-way pot, you're sort of protected just by that fact, where you're not going to get bluffed out too often just because people have to worry about all those other opponents calling them down. Anyway, that's my thinking, and I don't think I need to bet too big here, but I don't want to bet too small. So, not sure if that's even worth mentioning, but I bet $110. The button, however, right behind me makes it $240 to go, and it folds back to me. So it's a little bit gross slash annoying of a spot because the raise is so small and we're very deep in this situation. We're somewhere around $1,800 effective in this spot. The raise is only $130, but all of those things I just mentioned, I think are true. Maybe there's some chance my opponent could have like pocket 10s, flush draw and straight draw. Jack 10 of diamonds could be a possibility. Maybe some raw flush draw holdings. It's all speculation, and I don't really think that's the case. I think, as mentioned, my opponents are gonna play pretty straightforward and probably just call in those spots. Again, I don't really know for sure, but I do know that it's only $130 more. So, planning on folding on just about every turn card, I go ahead and make the call, and only due to the fact that the price is so good. Definitely planning on finding a fold on a lot of turn cards, the vast majority of turn cards. However, when the offsuit jack comes on the turn, that's not going to be a card that I'm going to fold to. I check it over to the button, who puts out another bet. This time it's about $550. That's a pretty sizable bet. There's about $1,000 behind. Folding is now out of the question, and it is now a debate between jamming it all in here on the turn or flat calling and hoping to see another bet the rest of the money on the river. If we flat call, we run the risk of maybe a diamond coming, a 9 coming, or some hand, some card that's gonna make me want to second guess calling it off, such as a king or an ace. I think my opponent's holdings are always going to be pocket 9s, an ace queen here, sometimes king queen, but probably not. I think if we jam it in, it's going to be pretty impossible for pocket 9s to fold. And I think if we jam it in, maybe after some Hollywooding and fake tanking, maybe we can also still get that call from ace queen. It's always a little bit tougher when you're out of position, deciding what to do in these kinds of spots. Anyway, after some deliberation, some real deliberation and debating between jamming it all in or flat calling, plus a little bit of Hollywooding here on the turn, I decide on the jam. I go ahead and just jam it all in there, hoping to get a call from pocket 9s or the naked queen. My opponent calls pretty quickly. So we are off to a river card, which, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I think it was a 10. I go ahead and show, since I was the aggressor, flip over the pocket jacks, and my opponent gives a very deflated sort of sigh, which to us is going to be good news. My opponent shows us ace queen. So again, my opponent was playing very straightforward there, as expected, in the 4-way pot, especially in a 3-bet pot. I feel like we're probably just gonna be getting owned there a lot on the flop, facing that flop raise and that sizing. The good news for us is that we get the maximum when we do connect, we do hit that jack. It would be really unfortunate to somehow not get the maximum after turning gin, because that would mean that our call on the flop of that raise is just completely unprofitable. So we do get the maximum here, and that works out extremely well, to say the least. And it's not often that I genuinely feel bad in poker, but this is a rare time when I actually kind of feel bad about that one. I think we could probably get away from it on the flop. We could probably find a fold, but I'm just not one to fold for those good prices, you know, those sizings, those small sizings. I don't like to let it go. And just that deflated sigh from my opponent, man, obviously my opponent feels much worse than I do about that. And I just know the feeling, you know. We've all been there, we've all given beats, we've all taken beats. We definitely know that feeling. The good news for us is we're scooping massive pot here in a 2-5 game. There's gonna be something like 800 big blinds or something absurd in this pot. Obviously, it's nice to see that massive amount of run good after some recent stretches of run bad. Often that's kind of gonna be the case when you have a pot of this size. Something ridiculous and crazy is gonna have to happen in order for 800 big blinds to get in the middle. And yeah, sure enough, something crazy happened here. And that's definitely gonna be the hand of the session and the most interesting hand of the session. It's gonna wrap up the session for us. We get into the game for $1,500. I added $500 on. We cash out of this game for $4,104. That's gonna be a profit of $2,604 according to my math. That's 500 big blinds. That's 5 standard buy-ins for a 2-5 game. Profit in one session. That's a pretty good 2-5 session. So no complaints. I'm a little bit tired, but happy to be sticking it out in this session and happy to have run into that run good.